Hi everybody, welcome back to Heather is Making Stuff. I'm Heather and today we're going to head back to the knitting machine for a look at another kind of double bed jacquard. This time I'm going to take you through what is called in the Superba manuals as Norwegian double bed jacquard with the Superba color changer and with the Jacquard Claw. So what I'm talking about is something like this right here, where we've actually got 4 different colors on a single line of knitting, and then it's a double bed fabric, so instead of floats or anything on the back, you've got this nice striped or bird's eye back. But you could apply this to just about anything, of course. Stripes, vertical stripes. This one here is actually a 3-color sample. Whoops. You can do that as well. And of course, your patterning input that I'm going to be using is Superbaknit. But if you don't have that, you can of course do this with whatever you've got, the light scanning box, the pressure pad, the pegboard, whatever you have, you can do this technique on any of those machines. So before we go to the knitting machine, I'm actually going to take you over and show you a close-up of all the components that you do get with the Superba color changer. So let's go there now. So the main pieces are this one, the actual color changer that attaches to the front bed of your machine. This piece here, which is called the yarn holder, and this is what attaches to your carriage to allow the color changer to work. And this guy here, which is called the flow comb cover. So definitely want to make sure you have all 3 of those parts. As well as indicated here, you should also receive another tension assembly and tension mast. Now, of course, you can get that separately. If you don't already have 2, you can probably find one on eBay. But that's what would have been included with the color changer originally. Now if we come over to the machine, you can see that I've already got my additional tension mast set up. I actually have 3 masts, so I can do 6 colors. Not strictly necessary, you only need 2 masts. Whoopsie. And then coming over here, I want to talk about your carriage for a minute, because there are some things that you need to be aware of. This carriage right here is the newer style, and has what I call the frog eyes, or what people call the frog eyes. And that's these guys right here. So these allow you to unscrew the whole yarn assembly. That'll just pop right off here when I unscrew this far enough. I'm gonna have to lift it up off the bed, but you can see this is loosening and coming off. Let me just take it right off while I'm here. There we go. So this piece will come off, and that's very important because you need this type of carriage in order to use the color changer. I'm just going to move it out of the way. If you have this older style carriage here, which does not have the frog eyes, there is no way to take off the yarn holding assembly. And this cannot, unfortunately, be used with the color changer. Now, you can still use this for 4-color jacquard, with the use of the Jacquard Claw. So I will show you all that in a bit, but for now, we're going to get rid of the older style carriage and use this newer style carriage, and I'm going to show you how to attach the color changer to your machine and to the carriage. Here we are at the side of our machine in extreme close-up, and I want to mention this as well. So this is the front rail of the machine, and it's very important that your machine has this cutout on the bottom here of that front rail. So this right here, the circular cutout, is where the plastic piece on the carriage slides back and forth. So they all have that. But this notch right here is where the color changer is going to attach to. And I know that some of the older machines or different machines don't have that. So you have to make sure you have the appropriate rail to be able to use the color changer. If you don't, I believe it can be changed, but it would be kind of a difficult venture, I think, and probably not everyone wants to attempt machine surgery. So if you're looking for a color changer, but you don't have this front rail, you may want to just focus on using the Jacquard Claw. Once you've determined that your machine has the proper front rail and your carriage is the right kind of carriage, you've got your tension unit installed. I'm not going to show you that because it's the same as installing any other tension unit on these machines. It'll be in your manual. You can go ahead and grab your color changer piece here and install it on the front bed. So all you want to do on the bottom here, you'll see that there are screws. You just loosen those enough so that, and I'm doing it the wrong way, so that this plate on the top is movable. But anyways, so this can move. And then this plate here is what's going to go into the groove that I just showed you on the bottom of that front rail. Just want to lift up this little metal bar here, and that is what's going to go into this groove right here, just like this. And that will just slide on like that. So make sure the little metal bar is actually in that slot. And then slide it on over and tighten up these screws. We will more thoroughly adjust the bed in a moment. The next step is to attach the yarn holder part to our carriage. You can feel when it lines up, although it's somewhat awkward. There we go. And then just screw these tight to hold everything on there. And you can see how it pulls it up as it tightens. So when they don't go anymore, that's as far as it goes, and there we go, it's attached. And now this will actually be what ends up triggering the color changer, and I will of course show you that in a little bit more detail. Now that we're ready to start knitting our pattern, you first need to go ahead and cast on in full needle rib over the number of stitches that you want to use. In this case, I'm using 50 stitches, 25 each side of 0, so that I can use my short comb. The important thing to remember when you're knitting this kind of jacquard, where you're going to be using the lily buttons and have the bird's eye back on the front bed, is that you need an even number of needles on the front bed. Doesn't matter on the back bed, but you do need those even needles on the front. So 50 needles accomplishes that as well. So the way to place the color changer, we've already put it into that rail. Now we want to slide it over so that it is even with the first needle out of work on the left-hand side. And I'm going to see if I can show you how that looks directly from the front. So you can see it's lined up exactly with that first out of work needle. And that is so that you don't end up bringing your carriages too far past the work on the left-hand side each time and getting tension problems. Now, in your color changer manual here, there are several other pages of little adjustments for the color changer. So I'm not going to go into those because it's pretty niche, but you need to make sure that it's all lined up correctly in order to properly change colors. So it's got information here about how far the clearance should be between this little finger here and the back of these white pieces, the sliders. And it's got information here as well about the clearance that should be between the top of the color changer and this other piece. So follow those instructions to make sure that you set it up correctly so it's lined up correctly with your knitting machine. And then make sure your bed spacing is on 5. It's very clear right here. Your needle spacing must be set on 5 or you're going to damage the color changer. So let's make sure that we do that. So with our carriage on the right, oh, I should mention as well that I have cast on with the regular yarn feeder that comes in the main carriage. Let me pan over there. With this one. So now I'm going to change that out for the color changer yarn feeder. I do that because I find this one so much easier to thread. So I will change that out now. And I'm going to do that with everything on the right-hand side. The carriage is on the right-hand side. And also with them on the right-hand side, I am going to, oh my goodness, this is rolling. I'm going to thread up my color changer. So as you can see, it's got these 4 spots for yarn, and they are numbered 1, 2, 3, 4. So when we put our yarns in the color changer, unsurprisingly, that's the order that we're going to want, and it's going to correspond to our tension masts. So we're going to thread them, number 1, 2, 3 and 4. Now our first piece today, we're going to just start with 3 colors. So we will only need to thread up 3 of them. And because we're only doing 3 colors, on the bottom here, you'll see a little slider that says 3, 4, or 2. To move that to 3, it's currently set on 3, but if we wanted to move that, you have to pull this piece out, and that allows you to slide this back and forth. So we're gonna leave it on 3 because that's what you're using, or we're using rather. And then you can see what happens when you do that. It makes the change in order. So the yarn feeder that's at the top is the one that is going to unthread. So that's the one that is currently in your carriage. The one that's in the middle is the one that's going to go next. And then this one, the third one, is at the bottom still because it's not currently engaged. So when you trigger this, you'll see what happens. Now this one is in the feeder, this one is ready to go next. And I must not have the bottom thing set correctly because this is not working. 4 and 3. Okay, so now this one is in the feeder, this one is ready to go next, this one is after that. There we go. So this one is now in the feeder, this one is ready to go next, this one is on after that, and it will just proceed through those changes in order, 1, 2, 3. If you're on the 2 yarn setting, there is a method described in the manual where you can do the changes manually, but it involves actually manually selecting where the little feeder is. It's something you could do, but personally, if I didn't want them to go in order each time, I would just use the Jacquard Claw myself, but it is possible to do. That is described in the manual. So now that we're gonna get into using the color changer a little bit more as well, I have changed to my color changer yarn feeder, but I do have this finger pushed back out of the way for now because we're not ready to start engaging the changer. Just a little note, when you do this, if you're gonna cast on with your first regular yarn feeder part and then change to this one, make sure you thread it correctly. Otherwise you run the very real risk of dropping all the weights onto your foot. And I know this because I'm still bleeding. So when you thread this guy, it's not hard. You just need to make sure that you go over top of this little finger here, and then between these 2 metal pieces here, pull it till it engages all the way to the back. That's threaded. And then for knitting with the changer, it always has to be in front of this little plastic finger flipper here. So now what we're gonna do is thread our next 2 yarn colors into this. So I'm gonna set this back to where it was because red will be our first color and that's what's currently in our carriages. So to thread up the next 2, you just make sure that your tension rods are properly threaded. And I'm gonna bring it down over this piece, through these guys, and then down through the beds and fasten it to the clip on the left-hand side. But it's kind of easier to do that starting with the clips. So I'm just gonna bring these 2 down at the same time, go over here and fasten them through the beds by just dropping them down through and fastening the clip. Then we're gonna bring these in front like this. And then we are going to just drop both of them into their appropriate little yarn guides. And then the next thing we need to do is take 1 stitch on the left-hand side and manually stitch these 2 yarns into that first stitch, just so that there's something to anchor the 2 yarns into the actual knitting work. I'm going to take these and just take 1 stitch at the left-hand side and manually knit those yarns in. So now both of them are anchored on the left-hand side, then they run into the yarn guides and up, and the tails are still fastened in the clip. The next piece is the flow comb cover, which looks like this. So I may or may not be knitting with this in the rest of the video. Every time I've used it in the past, it causes jams. So it is possible that it's, because the color changer was made for an actual later version of the Superba machines or a different version. Mine never actually would have come with a color changer. It is possible that this isn't intended to work with the carriage I have, and that's why we're having problems, but I'm going to show you how to put it on anyway, and then you can use it or not use it as you see fit. So how I've been doing this, and this again may be why I'm having problems, is you just slide it down and then it will sort of click when it's in the right spot. So it looks now like that's clipped into the right place. And we want the edge of that lined up with that last needle in work, and you just slide it down until it clicks. And then as I understand it, the purpose of this is just to stop your yarns getting tangled on the flow combs here, which they do have a tendency to do without it. So I'm going to try knitting with that in place, and we'll see how far we get. But for our knitting, we are going to start on the left-hand side. So making sure this driving finger is back so that we're not going to trigger the changer, I am just going to knit back across to the left, and then we can set up Superbaknit. Exciting! And already, I don't know if you could see that, the flow comb cover popped right off. So I'm going to put that back on and hope for the best, but I feel like I'm going to end up pulling this thing off before we really get going. So we're ready to knit our image now, or start our pattern knitting. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a 3-color image here. And if you don't know before you open it, you can tell when you open an image how many colors are in it, because this method here will say 3 for 3-color images, or 4 for 4 colors, or 5 or 6 if you have more than that. So don't forget to send your set 0 command with your cursor at 0. We've done that. Now we're going to click download and select the options that we want. So first of all, I always just input the width. And for this type of knitting, we are going to be using the skip stitch method. So this is familiar if you've done any knitting on a Japanese style flatbed knitting machine. It's the same idea. So some people call it slip jacquard, some people call it skip jacquard. It's the same deal, whereby you're knitting one color at a time, and all the stitches in the pattern that are not in the color that you're knitting are skipped, hence the name, or slipped. So we will select that. And the interesting thing about Superbaknit is it also gives you this option here called double bed. Now what this does is if you have any sections in your pattern where there aren't the full number of colors, it's going to insert a blank pass, or 2 blank passes, I guess, because you need to knit back to the color changer. And in that case, it will not knit anything on your back bed, but only on your front bed, just to keep your color changes in order. Because with this Superba color changer, it's an automatic changer, so it always wants to grab the colors in order, and it's a bit of a pain to do it manually. So that's why we select double bed. I'm going to put double bed on just in case, to make sure we don't run into problems. And I am going to select left, because you always want to be starting at the left for this kind of jacquard work. And we must select double rows. The reason for this being, in order to knit from our color changer, which is always on the left-hand side of the bed, and back to it, you have to have 2 rows the same. You can't knit one color to the right and then leave your yarn hanging there and knit one color, another color back to the left. Well, you can, but it's kind of a pain, and certainly it doesn't work with the color changer. So for this kind of double bed jacquard, you always need to select double rows. And because that elongates the pattern and makes it look funny, if I'm doing that, I also like to select double stitches, just to keep it looking sort of the same. And these options don't matter, but I'm going to take off wrap because I only want to knit it once, and I'm going to take off repeat. It doesn't really matter. It's going to be too big, I think, anyway, for 50 stitches. Yeah. So it doesn't even quite fit in our 50 stitches, but this is what we'll be knitting. Now watch what happens if I take off double rows and I try to knit this. Pattern row 1, not the same as row 2. So you get an error, and basically it's telling you you can't do that. So you do need to make sure that you select double rows. So I'm going to say OK to start the transfer of the pattern to the knitting machine. And you can see that our pattern is 264 rows to knit one complete pattern. One complete butterfly is 264 rows. So that's quite a bit. But because you're knitting 3 passes on the front to make 1 row. So that's why it's your number of rows in your original pattern times 3. So we've got that all sent to the knitting machine. I'm going to click knit, and here we are ready to go. So you can just double check everything is right. Your carriage should be on the left hand side. We're going to be starting with our background color, which on this is blue, but we know that it's not blue actually in the yarn, but that doesn't matter. And we've got 2 rows of each color. So everything looks good. Here's those blank passes where there's nothing on the back bed, but it will knit across the front bed. Like I say, just to keep our color changes in order, but everything is great. So I'm going to go ahead and click knit and take you back over to the machine. Okay, so we're ready to start knitting. Our carriages and cursor are on the left. Everything in Superbaknit is ready to go. The only thing is to set up our carriages. So it's going to be the same on both front and back beds. You leave your needle return levers in the neutral position, but you want to cancel everything else, and that's on the back bed as well. So we're not having anything selected, including the Jacquard button. We do not want to press that on either bed. The only thing we want to do is put these lily buttons in the upward position, and that means it's going to knit across every other needle on the front bed with each row. So it just saves us a little bit of space on the front bed. So once our carriages are set up, ready to go, I am going to knit across from left to right and show you what happens. Okay, so that's the exact result that we want. It knit every other stitch across the front bed, and that it did knit most of the stitches on the back bed, with the exception of these 4 in the middle, which it skipped, which is exactly what we want, because that is the section of our pattern that is going to be in that second color, where that butterfly actually starts. The red is our background color. So that's perfect. It means it did what we want to do. Now, when we're going to knit back towards the left, we have to make sure that we engage the color changer. And very important to make sure it's sitting in front of this finger, otherwise it will not unthread correctly when we go across. Have a look at our color changer. Yes, red is in the carriage, and it's ready to load our blue and then white. So that's perfect, it's ready to go. Only thing left to do is knit across to the left and hope it changes colors correctly. And because we did select double rows, this row back to the left will be exactly the same. So those same 4 stitches will still be skipped. Okay, perfect. So it knit correctly. And I just want to show you our yarns here. So you can see that our blue is at the top. And as soon as we go back this direction, the momentum, I guess, is going to pull that into the feeder. So that's good. Blue is correct. Red, if you can see under here, is looped around, for lack of a better word, this finger. And that's perfect. That means when we go this direction, it's going to pop right out there and remain in our yarn holder on the color changer. White is sitting right here, and that's also what we want. It just hangs out here to keep it out of the way while we knit to the left. So that's perfect. Everything there looks good. When we knit back to the right, everything should be in the exact right position to knit properly. Sometimes you will need to pull out a little bit of slack from here just to make sure it's not getting hung up. So you do have to watch that closely with the color changer. All right, fingers crossed that nothing falls to the floor when we knit back this direction. Looking good, everything is in the right position, except this. So I don't know if you saw what happened there, but so this blue yarn, as it went into the yarn holder, it went in properly, except it is now behind this white finger. It has to be in front in order to unthread properly. So this is something that you have to double check with every single row. So, and it looks like everything knit correctly. Okay, so every other stitch knit on the front bed, and those 4 stitches that are supposed to be in the second color on the back bed did knit. And just to confirm that everything is in the right place, we've got our 3 yarns where they're supposed to be, and we do. Knit back to the right. Some slack that I'm going to pull out there. And again, red has gone behind the finger, so let's just fix that before we go back. Good. So when everything is working correctly, it's a pretty cool little system. It's only when it's not working correctly that it's a real pain. But I'm going to go do some more rows off camera and see how far we get in this pattern before I show you how to knit with the Jacquard Claw. So here is the finished or almost finished product of our 3-color knitting. You can see that the image looks like we wanted it to based on the settings we chose in Superbaknit, and the back looks like this. It's a thicker fabric, and these yarns are maybe not the thinnest. I could probably go thinner with the yarns is what I'm saying. So this might be a little bit nicer with a thinner yarn. You can see from the side edges it's pretty thick. Now, one thing I will note, I did have some trouble along the left edge with occasionally some of the stitches knitting 2 or 3 yarns at a time. You can see the right edge is much cleaner. And I suspect that has a lot to do with the fact that I am not able to use the flow comb cover, because the way it's pulling in the yarns is sometimes they're all coming in front of the needle and then it's knitting all 3 of those yarns. I'm going to take this opportunity to get the color changer out of the way and show you how to set up the Jacquard Claw in case you wanted to do this kind of 3-color work with the claw. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take this off the bed and I'm going to take the yarn feeder off the machine, put the original one back on, and then show you how to set it up with the claw. It's easier than you might think. And the next thing I'm going to do is put on the Jacquard Claw, this cute little frog foot looking thing here. And all you do is under these brushes, there's a little place to snap it in. So it just sort of pops on like this. You want it like angled down this way. And slide it in there, and then it tilts back and forth. Now, there is a whole series of how you're supposed to tip it and when, but that's not something that I really bother with. The whole thing is it on the carriage in the right place? Yes, it does tip properly. And then I am going to thread my yarn into my carriage. And now I'm ready to continue on knitting the next row of my pattern. However, why did I thread that? Because the next row that I need is actually blue. So right now I'm going to just take out that yarn that I just threaded up, and I'm going to take our blue and white yarns, and basically the process is the same as what we did with the color changer. I'm going to put them down, secure them to the stud, and you really should do an anchoring stitch on the left-hand side like we did with the color changer, but I'm going to be a rebel and not do it and hope it doesn't ruin everything. So let's just drop those down here. There we go. So what we're going to do with the ones that we're not knitting with is keep them over here attached to the claw. And you can do front, you can do back. It doesn't really matter. We're going to be knitting with blue, and our red is going to remain back there. And they are not crossed. No, they're not. So that's good. And white we haven't actually used yet, so it's not a big deal. And I'm going to knit from left to right and hope that everything carries on exactly as it should. And it did. Wonderful. So I'm going to knit back to the left, and then we'll change to the white. All right, so here's where it gets a little interesting, is with our yarn management. So the biggest thing to keep in mind with the claw is that you don't want to create a bunch of yarn twists. So the next one we're going to need is the white. So we're going to thread that in a second, but I'm going to unthread the blue and bring it back over here. And I want to make sure that it goes under the red so that they don't get tangled. So you can do that any way you want, as long as you're crossing them over each other in the correct direction, if that makes any sense. And since my white is still way over here, I'm gonna just come all the way over here to grab it. You don't have to do that every time, obviously. And then when I knit back from left to right in white, it's the exact same process. I'm gonna come back to the left and change to my red yarn. Let's make sure it all works. Great. So now, again, we want to unthread and bring our red yarn forward, making sure that they're not tangled together, and thread the carriage manually, which is a little awkward. That's true. Pull out any slack and knit across. Okay, and then just carry on in exactly that manner. This is the full needle rib section at the beginning. Then here's the section I was doing with the color changer. And then from here up is the section I did with the claw. So there's not any discernible difference between the part that I did with the color changer and the part that I did with the claw, either on the front or the back. Whoops, other than the fact that the changer is a little bit faster, of course. So if we flip it over, here's what our back looks like. Okay. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this look at knitting 3-color jacquard, double bed jacquard with the Superba color changer and the jacquard claw. I hope you'll join me in my next video, because I had filmed a whole bunch more content, but this video is just way too long already. So next time we're going to take a look at how you can improve your resolution in 3-color jacquard by not having to expand your pattern with the double rows feature, so your image can be smaller and higher resolution. We're going to take a look at 4-color jacquard and hopefully 5 and 6-color jacquard with the claw as well, if I do get time. And if you do have any tips for me about using the flow comb cover, I would love to hear from you in the comments, because that thing and I just do not get along. So thanks again. I'll see you next time. Happy knitting.